This is the Bookwaves, Artwaves Hour. Interviews with writers on KPFA's nationally syndicated Bookwaves program, along with interviews about film and theater and archive book interviews that stretch back 4 decades. I'm your host, Richard Wolinsky. Today we hear an interview with nature writer Robert Macfarlane, whose latest book is titled Is a River Alive?, published in hardback in 2025 and now out in trade paperback. The Book of Birds, A Field Guide to Wonder and Loss by Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morales, was published in June 2026. As usual, you can find updated links and listings to bookstore and live theater venues by clicking on the link at the top of today's Bookwaves Artwaves page at kpfa.org. You can also find a link to the same list by going to the Bay Area Theater podcast page, also at kpfa.org, where you can read and hear the latest theater reviews. My guest is Robert Macfarlane, whose latest book is a River Alive? There are 8 earlier books, including Holloway, Landmarks, The Wild Places, and the first time I interviewed you, Underland, A Deep Time Journey. Is a river alive? The answer is, for one set of people, yes, for another, no.
Right, exactly, yeah.
What I want to do is go back to the beginning of the book. When you finish a book, what happens to Rob Macfarlane? Or do you have something else in mind? What brings you to this particular book when you're done with the last, or were you not finished with the last?
That's such an interesting question, not one I've ever been asked before, I don't think. As it happens, Underland, which was the last big book before this one, comes to the surface again at a little wood where a spring rises and flows away. And that is exactly where Is a River Alive begins. So in a sense, they are continuous with one another geographically. But Underland took 8 years, and I needed a rest. And books take the time that needs to be taken, is a phrase I sometimes use. And so it took a little while for this book to emerge. And I wanted to write about life. It seems crazily ambitious, even bombastic, but I wanted to understand what we deem to be alive and what is alive and what's dead. That's the spring question, we could say. That's where it all rises from. And then rivers emerge, step forwards as really fascinating, powerful ways to think about that question. And then they took over my life and my mind.
I couldn't get a sense of the order of books, but when you wrote Holloway with a friend of yours, you were kind of stuck in the Cambridge area, is that correct? Because that was during COVID. So at that particular time, were you thinking about what would happen when all this craziness ended?
Yeah, well, the first notes I scratched down for the River book were these 3 questions, and I scratched them down early in COVID, and they were these questions: does a forest think? Can a mountain remember? And is a river alive? And maybe, I don't know, I haven't thought about this. Maybe it's something to do with that confinement that we were all living within that caused my mind to go outwards to these big questions of huge presences and spaces. The other thing that was happening in early COVID was I was becoming re-obsessed with the Epic of Gilgamesh. And that book continues to be central to a lot of what I make and think, and it's really important in Is a River Alive? But that book contains the first story of ecocide, right? Gilgamesh and Enkidu go to the cedar wood, the sacred cedar wood, and they fell it. And they fell it extravagantly, unnecessarily. They fell it all the way to the banks of the Euphrates. So the forest in that story, which is about 4,500 years old in the earliest form, has a mind. It thinks, it is alive, it is animate. Humbaba, the forest demon, centralizes these presences and forces. So when I trace it back, I think that the Epic of Gilgamesh is close to the source of this book, these ideas like what is alive, what lives.
I recall during our conversation by computer during the COVID era, you said, if you ever come over here, we'll go down to the spring or whatever that was. You
Right.
told me
Yeah.
that at the time. Something was on your mind, even though you
Yeah.
weren't talking about it.
So interesting. Well, let me first of all say the invitation still stands. And the
Thanks.
spring is still just about alive. It's having a hard time. When I left England a few weeks ago, we were like 6 weeks into the severest spring drought in 50 years, I think. So the spring is fragile. Rivers are fragile. You know, they're rare and they're fragile. We sometimes forget that 0.05% of the world's water flows in rivers. That's wild. They're rare and they're fragile, and my spring especially so. Not my spring, the spring that I call a friend. Let me put it like that.
So you had this idea, you were spinning it in your mind, and you were working on other essays and small projects. And then COVID began to end, and the idea took over. So take us back into your frame of mind as you began to realize you could travel, and how did you settle on the three, quote, rivers that
Mm.
make up Is a River Alive?
There are four landscapes, riverscapes. One is my chalk, and the little stream that rises as the spring that we've been talking about. And then, yes, these three big journeys, you're right, that became possible as the world reopened. And I took them in 22 to 23 quite intensively, sequentially in the order they're told in the book. And the first is to Ecuador, to this cloud forest, Los Cedros, which is, its name is the same as the cedar forest at the heart of Gilgamesh, and the rivers who flow from it. And I say who flow very deliberately, as I do in the book. I speak of rivers who. The second is to the stricken rivers of Chennai in southeast India. The third to Quebec, northeastern Quebec, or Nitassinan, to give it the Innu name for the unceded homeland there. And a river, wild river called the Mutaheka Hippu, or Magpie River, who flows through that landscape for more than 100 miles. Why? Because rivers were under severe threat in all three places, and also rivers were being radically reimagined in all three places.
How many areas were you originally thinking about, and what brought you to each of them? And let's start one at a time, which is
Yeah.
the first one, Ecuador, where you went on a hike, if you want to call it that, or a journey with a woman named Juliana
Yeah.
and some friends to look for fungi in the I guess you'd almost call it a river of air in a way at the top of a mountain in Ecuador. How did you get that as the first? And were there other choices at that point?
So, unlike almost any other book I've written, I had a very clear sense of this book structurally, though it came on to surprise me in so many ways, and geographically, though again the geography surprised me when I was in the field. But it was always those three, and they stayed very steady. So, Ecuador, why Ecuador? Well, so I traveled to Los Cedros, this cloud forest in the north, as you say, and this place of astonishing ultra life. I mean, I come from the country that industrialized itself first, deforested itself first, denatured itself drastically. We're like 186th in the most nature depleted countries list. So to be in that cloud forest where endemicity, diversity, abundance are just off the scale was mind blowing and wondrous to me. But why? Because in 2008, Ecuador recognized the rights of nature in its constitution. It revised its constitution and it embedded four incredible articles that radically reimagined the human relationship with nature. They're called the Rights of Nature articles. And the first of them guarantees the right of rivers, forests to flow, to grow, or in the terms of the constitution, I think it is to exist, to flourish, and to persist, and to be respected. So something morally, legally remarkable happened there. And it was those articles which in the end came to save Los Cedros when the mining companies came for it. So I was walking into a forest that shouldn't exist, that did exist because of this moral reimagining of the human relationship with nature. And that's why I was drawn there. And the fungi were part of that expedition, part of a way to reinforce the protection of that astonishing forest and rivers.
At the end of Is a River Alive, you mentioned that after writing Underland, you began to receive a lot of emails regarding nature. Is that how you came into contact with Cesar, the Colombian lawyer, or was it Juliana who first approached you so that you had the connection?
Yeah, I sometimes call this in fungal terms, the mycelium running, as Paul Stamets, the great mycologist, puts it. So that, our cultural mycelia happen as well. Mycelia, as you know, Richard, are the mycorrhizal network that connects tree to fungus, fungus to fungus, this amazing, great, invisible network, a kind of wood wide web, it's sometimes called, though it's not just trees that it connects to. So yeah, I find it hard to remember how I met these people. I reached out to Juliana, but she was a friend of Merlin Sheldrake, the great mycologist, author of Entangled Life. Cesar was too, and then we developed our independent friendship. Cesar introduced me to the two judges, Agustin and Ramiro, who handed down this amazing constitutional court ruling that saved the forest from the miners. So the mycelium ran, this group gathered of lawyers and activists and judges and mycologists and an amazing sound recordist called Cosmo Sheldrake. And we traveled up to this remote area of forest, of cloud forest.
When you were walking up, because it sounds like it was pretty steep to get there, it sounds as if you were kind of just walking through a forest and suddenly the air itself was raining, or it felt like that?
Well, a cloud forest differs from a rainforest in that it works with mist. So the precipitation there is really condensation, vaporous condensation. So it actually relatively rarely rains in a cloud forest. But instead, this mist that you walk up into, you're right, you walk up a cloud of unknowing that just veils everything, creeps around every surface. And because it's an epiphytic forest where bryophytes, epiphytes, plants grow on other plants, the surface area for condensation is immense. So the mist creeps in, heavily laden vaporous air, condenses on the leaves, rolls off in this beautiful process called continuous fog drop. And that is the cloud forest equivalent of rain, and it makes rivers. A cloud forest is a river maker.
You're listening to an interview with Robert Macfarlane, whose latest book is a River Alive? I'm Richard Wolinsky on the Bookwaves, Artwaves Hour. Rob Macfarlane, is that kind of similar to what people in San Francisco would experience when the fog rolls in, or people in London?
Yeah, back in the day when we had fogs in London, very rare now. Yeah, if you have a beard and you walk in a Bay Area fog or mist, you'll notice that the water condenses on your beard or your eyebrows or your hair, and it's a bit like that in a cloud forest, but it's happening at like insane volume and area, and the amount of vapor is so great, so it rolls off. So the rivers who flow from this mountainous cloud forest are so clear watered, they're so sort of pure, and then they and blue, and they leap blue silver. They're extraordinary presences, but they would have been turned red with silt and with toxins, cyanide from gold mining, which was the interest that these two mining companies, Canadian and Ecuadorian, had in the forest. They would have deleted the forest and its rivers.
What's the story with Los Cedros now? Is it safe?
Such an important question. I'm really grateful to you for asking it. The ruling, the Constitutional Court ruling that came down in 2021 was this sort of miracle, and it threw this force field based on the rights of nature around the forest and its rivers. Says, no, we must respect the rights of the forest and rivers. Mining companies had to abandon the area, make good any damage they had caused, which wasn't very much at the time, but they prowl. They prowl the perimeter, testing the judgment, seeding division, because gold, I mean, when I was there, it was like $1,517 a troy ounce. Now it's way north of that because of Ukraine, because of tariff wars, and gold is where capital flees to in a volatile time. So the mountain, as it were, the forest, is worth much more. So the pressures are huge. I'm part of an international and Ecuadorian group of guardians of the forest, and we work very actively. The Los Cedros Fund is the fund that we have if anyone is interested in finding out more. And we work to protect that place of ultra life from devastation.
There was a similar one right nearby that was completely destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, the Intag Valley, which is the valley of which Los Cedros is, well, to which it is proximate, is the valley, I think, with the longest history of anti-mining resistance in South America, 30 plus years now. But sometimes the companies have got in and caused calamity. Other times they've been fought off, and many, wave after wave of mining companies have come for the gold and the copper in those hills.
Juliana was looking for fungi, found a couple of rare mushrooms. Aside from understanding the relationship of the entire fungal undergrowth, what do these mushrooms do for us in a way? I mean, how do we interact with them other than being great mushrooms?
Other than being great mushrooms, and in a way, the rights of nature thinking is about intrinsic value. It's about saying they do not need a use value, for us. But, and I should say that Juliana, who is a very hardcore field mycologist, is also one of the most remarkable, almost supernatural people I've ever met. And she can sense fungi. She calls it hearing them, or she speaks of the fuzz in the matrix. I mean, that sounds crazy, but I watched her do this. We were looking for these tiny, tiny brown witch-hatted fungi, psilocybin species, in the forest. They'd had one collection about 10 years earlier. You have to make a second collection to have them ratified scientifically. So we were looking for the second collection. And she would say, I think they're near. I think I can hear them. But then we would go around 2-3 bends in the path. And then she would yell out, woohoo, which is her kind of greeting for a mushroom, and she would hurl herself down. And there she found both of them. Absolutely astonishing. What can they do? Well, one answer to that is they can help fortify the more conventional environmental protections for the forest. So, as you find new species, the protection increases, as it were, within conventional framings.
The other part of that is that by understanding how fungi exist, because she insists they are another species apart from, I guess, animal and plant. They tell us something else about nature, I think.
They do. I mean, they are a different kingdom, or kingdom, as Juliana prefers to call it, kingdom, which I like very much. And she says, why would we have a kingdom? Why a queendom? Why not a kingdom? The families of relationship. But they just live in such wildly different ways to us. And we've associated them with disgust as well, right? Fungi are they feed on rot. We associate them with death. They're kind of icky and slime. I mean, those are some of the conventional imaginings. But of course, and The Last of Us has not helped with the PR of fungi recently. But I think broadly there's been a pivot and a recognition that they underpin so much life on Earth. Carbon storage, forest connection, species abundance, rot, which in itself is an absolutely fundamental component of the cycle of life and death. All of these things are undertaken by fungi. So yeah, she and Merlin Sheldrake and many others have become these great speakers with and thinkers for fungi.
One thing I connect up is that I grew up, and you grew up as well, with this idea that there's humans, and then there's animals, and then there's plants. And, then there are like dolphins or whales that are kind of smart. But then we're learning about not only mushrooms or fungi, but we're also learning about octopus, and that what we perceive is that we're just another species, and these species are and I'll put it in quotes, intelligent in ways that we're not even aware.
Well, we don't need to we can take those quotes away. They're absolutely intelligent in ways that we're not aware, sentient in ways that we are not sensate. There's the Jacob von Uexküll, the 19th century sort of early pioneer of these questions. He coins the phrase Umwelt, the kind of world sensing nature of a species. And he says, yeah, humans have got an Umwelt. We have amazing noses. You probably know this, Richard, but we have some of the most sensitive noses in the animal kingdom. But octopi have an Umwelt, and fungi have an Umwelt. They can sense and know, if we're happy using that word, in ways that we're completely unable to do so. All of that is a way of beginning to reparticularize the worlds and life ways of other species, and behind that and beyond that lies the work of dethroning the human. Human supremacism, which waxes very strong in the current administration, models life, as you say, as a pyramid with humans at the top. It's not. It's a web.
Let's move on to India. You said before that these three areas were always there in your brain. You didn't need to go further. Did Yuvan contact you via email? How did that work to bring you to, of all places, Chennai?
Oh, that's it's something I don't write about in the book. So Yuvan Aves, who is each of the regions has a sort of central character or characters. I call them characters because everyone else does, which makes them sound like they've come out of a novel, but they're so vivid and remarkable that I just wrote them down, really. But so there's Juliana, Cesar, and Cosmo in Ecuador, and then in Chennai there's Yuvan, and Yuvan is young. He's like barely 30. He grew up in a household that was filled with love from his mother, but filled with violence from his stepfather. And at 16, he ran away from that violence, and he went inland to a Krishnamurti school called Pashala, on his own. And there he underwent what I sometimes call his chrysalism, his crystallization. He kind of cocooned himself and reformatted his whole way of being from this, beaten and hurt young man to become this astonishing, expansive naturalist and activist. And while he was there, he read a book. One of the books, 3 or 4 books that helped him through that time, I learned later, turned out to be a book of mine called The Old Ways. I have no idea how a copy of that found its way to a Krishnamurti school inland of Chennai. But Yuvan read it, and he wrote to me, and I think it was 2018. And so we'd been friends for 5 years by the time I went out there to Chennai. And I traveled with him. We trusted each other absolutely. And he took me into his world, into this water city. And I was able to look through his eyes a little, feel with his remarkable mind a little.
Chennai sounds like the rivers that exist in the city are dead or enclosed. Oh, yeah. There's pretty much nothing there unless you travel upstream. What was it like to be in Chennai itself? I mean, I've never been to India. It's supposed to be like the senses are overwhelmed.
Definitely. I mean, the same was true of the cloud forest, of course, just in a different way. I think both are both the city, it's a kind of maximum city, people sometimes say. The cloud forest was ultra, I think I've said. So they're both places of life. But yeah, Yuvan and I started. So it's a city of 3 rivers, just so your listeners who haven't been there can envisage it. And it's built on marsh, on wetland. Rivers run through it, the Kosastalaya, the Kuam and the Adya, running from north to south. And they all rise on the Deccan Plateau inland. So we started up inland, then we followed the rivers where they were kind of clear and bright and full of life. And then as they move into this aura, the penumbra of the city, they begin to thicken and sicken. And by the time they reach the Indian Ocean, stretches of them are as close to dead as any river I've seen or known. So 0% dissolved oxygen, 0 species count. they come back to life. When the monsoon comes, they get flushed through, life returns, life thrives. So it's complex. Yuvan was always really particular. He was like, barrenness is a state of mind and very rarely a state of land. So he did not want me to write off his rivers as dead, and he was right to want that.
There's a sequence involving sea turtles picking up their eggs. How far was that beach from the city?
Oh, so this is the Chennai beach. Chennai is sort of globally famous, I guess, for this strand, this sort of 8-9 mile beach that, so the Indian Ocean crashes in, this big dragging surf, and then the city is right there, hard up against the strand. So these mother sea turtles, they come in every January and February to nest, and they've been doing it for millions of years. That's one of the things that moved me so much. These mothers coming in through the dark night water, they come at night, and they haul themselves up onto the sand. They dig these pits. They lay maybe 100 little ping pong ball shaped eggs, and then they kind of ghost out of there. And they've been doing that for millions of years. But it's changed because the beaches are now so busy with vehicles that collapse the nests, busy with feral dogs that dig out the nest. So this amazing group of humans, the Turtle Patrol, has formed about 25 years ago, and every night during nesting season they walk that beach and they dig out the eggs from the nests very scrupulously, and then they carry them and rebury them in a hatchery on a safe area of the beach. And for me, that became this, in this despair hope dialectic that the whole book lives in, that we all live in right now. This became a very beautiful extension of care from humans to more than humans, and yeah, it's wonderful.
How big were these eggs that you carried over?
Well, each one is like a crinkly ping pong ball. But there are maybe, I dug out some nests. We count them as they come out. We count them back in when we rebury them. So 100, 120, you pick them out warm from that sand nest, and you just feel life in potentia pulsing in your hand.
Is there any way that Chennai will turn things around and life could return there? Or is India, those cities, so far gone that it will have to take the destruction of humans to bring them back?
Oh, no. Wonderful, amazing things are happening there. People working for the common good, for water as a common good, rivers as life forces. I mean, the cities have modernized so rapidly and grown so rapidly that the infrastructure that we perhaps see embedded in our city plans are absent. Yeah, despair is a luxury. That's what I came to realize in Chennai. And so we can't kind of write our species or ourselves or our cities off. We just have to keep working for the good. And Yuvan and his friends were doing that. And they were winning. I mean, very briefly, we saw one lagoon where there's a road widening project going to go right through the lagoon. We went to the lagoon. We took a bunch of photos. We took a video showing where the road could go. We did a load of bird counts, filed all that to the court system. 2 days later, the judge ruled against the road widening project. So amazing. Wouldn't have happened in the US or in England, but it happened there.
You're listening to an interview with Robert Macfarlane, whose latest book is A River Alive? I'm Richard Wolinsky on the Bookwaves, Artwaves Hour. What is the effect of the Modi government on what's happening? From our perspective, we see yet another authoritarian, but is there kind of a difference between a Modi and a Trump in that sense, or are they kind of two peas in the same pod?
Well, I'm not best placed to comment comparatively. I mean, Modi they're both strongmen leaders. We can say that they both like to perform their strength. Modi likes to perform a certain piety as well, it seems to me. He's a Hindu strongman as well, it's important to say. And I will say that in India, it is a dangerous place to be a journalist if you write against the government. It is a dangerous place to be an environmental activist. And various laws are deployed, including anti-sedition / anti-terror laws, to suppress environmental activism, which is seen as being, or is portrayed as being anti-India, anti-development.
So Yuvan and his friends have to be very careful.
Yeah, they're brave. They're really brave, and they do have to be careful. But as Yuvan says, we have to be like the mongoose, agile and nipping and finding our way between the cracks in the city.
So it's kind of like plants growing up between concrete blocks in a
Yep.
city.
And shifting them, right? We know that that's what plants can do. Yeah, and the people tree, this fig tree that I saw, like it disassembles whole buildings in India and indeed elsewhere. So they're a little bit like that. They're the people tree that begins as a single seed and then infiltrates the roots and then moves huge structures.
Yeah, it reminds me in a way of the wisteria in my front, which every day I go out and there are new shoots that just pop out, and you can cut them back, but they're there the next day as well.
Right. The vigor of the living world. I mean, it is irrepressible. And there's a New Yorker cartoon I sometimes think of. Is like two planets meet in the solar system, and one says to the other, "You're not looking very well. What's up?" And he just says, "I've got a bad case of Homo sapiens, but it'll pass." And on the one hand, that's very funny, and it is funny. But on the other, I think it's a dangerous kind of thinking. The world will be all right in the end, but it needs to be all right now, and we are part of its betterment, and we need to be responsible for the present and for the futures to come.
Rob Macfarlane, the third place you visited, and we will get to the spring again because that
Mm.
involves
Mm.
family, but the third place you visited was a river. You can pronounce it. I am not going to in Innu, but it's the Magpie River in Canada, which is way north of Montreal, I guess,
Yeah, yeah,
or
northeast.
northeast, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it depends how you map your globe, but yeah, let's say so. You drive basically northeast from Montreal for about 600 miles, more or less, on the Côte Nord, and then you reach the mouth of this remarkable river at the Gulf, where it reaches the sea at the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
I think of all the places there, that one, I wanted to see more pictures
Ah,
because it sounds just absolutely glorious. How did you come to know about the river itself?
mm. Yeah, so in Innu Aiman, the Innu language, it's pronounced. It has various pronunciations, but the Muteshikau Shipu or the Mutahekau Hipu, and that means the river who flows between square blocky cliffs. There are various other translations. So it's a wild river. It's a rocky river. Flows for about 100 plus, well over 100 miles off the Canadian Shield down from up near the Labrador border. I heard about it because in 2021, the same year that the Los Cedros judgment was handed down to save the cloud forest, it became the first river in Canada to have the rights of the river declared and its legal personhood asserted. And that took the form of a mirror resolution, as it's called, between the Mingan Regional Council and the Innu Council at the small township near the mouth of the river called Equanisht. And the Innu version of that says the river is alive. The river is a living being, a physical and spiritual entity, and it has rights. It has the right to flow, has the right to go undammed, it has the right to reach the sea, it has the right to go unpolluted. So, pretty, yeah, we're back with this idea of radically reimagining rivers. And that's what those resolutions did in a Canadian context. So I was drawn to it because of as it were, the ideas that misted it, but also, my God, it just looked beautiful. And it is.
You knew that you wanted to go there after 2021. What was the process of putting that together? Did you immediately call your friend, Wayne
Yeah.
Chambliss, at that point and said, let's do the river?
Pretty much, he's a man as excited by landscape and by ideas as I am, more so, arguably. And yeah, I knew I needed a good friend there, and I knew that Wayne could turn ideas upside down and help me think from different perspectives on them. And also, I had to try and make initial contact with the Innu community there because I couldn't just rock up and go down this river that's flowed through that community for the best part of 8,000 years. So I discovered that one of the community leaders there was this amazing woman called Rita Mestacosho, a a poet who writes in Innu and French, keeper of her language, keeper of her people, and fighter for the river, who she very uncomplicatedly refers to as a relative, a friend, as alive, absolutely. And that was quite tricky. Getting in touch with Rita was quite tricky. And in the end, I made effectively a 4-day journey to the mouth of that river to see Rita and to ask her permission. And if she'd said no, Wayne and I would have turned around and gone home because I needed her permission. But when I did ask her, I said, Rita, can I descend the river? She laughed at me and she said, yeah, of course you can have my permission, but you need the river's permission. I was like, oh, okay, how do I set about that? She also tasked me with this wonderful set of tasks to undertake on the river and ways of thinking differently about the river that were central to my understanding.
Rob Macfarlane, when I read the book, and in all 3 stories, there are places where spiritualism, something beyond the mundane idea that life is cold, you live, you die, and there's nothing beyond that. I sometimes have a hard time coming up against spiritualism versus my standard cynicism. Is that something that affects you as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was brought up in a scientific household. I guess I was what you might call a secular Protestant. I went to church, I sang in the choir, but there was no belief. There was no faith element to that. It was more ritualized. And I think I don't even like the word spiritual or spiritualist. I think for me it comes with too much that makes my toes curl a tiny bit just by habit, and yet I sometimes think of what it might be to be a materialist mystic, something like this, or a mystical materialist, by which I mean that one can confront and meet the given world, the world we live in, the world of matter and river and bird and human and air, and understand that we know the tip of a wing of a fraction of a quarter of an element of this world. Science can dream of itself as totalizing, but we're surrounded by mystery, and encounter finesses the real into a greater marvelousness to me. So I feel very at ease with unknowing. And things happen to me on that river that in many ways can be described with a materialist base, but they manifested in me very, very metaphysically. So, well, you've read it. I've kind of, some of the most extraordinary co-authorings I've ever known. I mean, the Rivers really did write the 2 endings of the book, which, spoilers, it's not a murder mystery, but, strange things happen in the final pages where it all comes together.
When I talk to a lot of novelists, fiction writers, they will say that something sort of takes over when they're writing, that they're in a way channeling something, but what they're channeling could be a murder mystery, it could be science fiction, it could be just a domestic whatever, but it's coming out in a first draft and then gets edited into something else. So I have to open my own thoughts to what input exactly is coming into us. And I guess that's what's going on with you.
Yeah, some kind of external. Well, in my case, the river. The river was the input. There's no mystery about that. I thought the book would end at the sea, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, as we did, and there was an ending I wrote. But prior to that, something even more remarkable, more powerful happened, and the river wrote that almost through me. That's the best. It sounds fey, quaint. I don't know, but it's true. It's just what happened, and I thought that was the end of the book. It ends, the main section ends, I am rivered. And, if you're that the river has become a verb. But then I went home and this epilogue that you alluded to, the final pages of the book, just 2.5 pages, take place at the springs, the little springs near my home. And there again, the water wrote it. I just went up to see the springs, and then this pageant, this drama, this film played itself out in front of me, unbidden, as I crossed the little bridge into the wood. And that was where the river had become time, had flowed on but beyond my lifetime, in ways that I found very moving. I went home and wrote it down, and that became the final end of the book.
Rita, before you went on the river, gave you a couple of challenges, one of which I was waiting for, and then you mentioned at the end that it had happened, but you didn't mention, or maybe it was a sentence I missed or something. When exactly did you fast for 24 hours?
Oh, well, I only managed, I think, 16. Wayne did the full 24, as I recall, but it was just after. Yeah, she gave us this series of, always pitch your tent to the east, collect me water from there, Labrador tea from here, fast then, look for the sacred tree, the l'arbre sacré. And she also said, you have one question for the river, and if you get the question right, you'll hear the answer from the river. And that came powerfully true. But we fasted right after we came off the lake. So we paddled this immense lake for 3 days to reach the river's mouth. And then we hauled up for 2 nights, just a mile or two down the river. And that's where we fasted.
Had you been doing much kayaking before? I mean, I've known Paul Theroux for many years, and I know that he kayaks frequently. Or I haven't talked to him since the pandemic. Do you kayak frequently?
No. So I grew up as a mountaineer, as you know, and that gave me a certain risk assessment, should we say, and a certain confidence in wild country, but mountains on the whole stay still. I mean, unless rivers don't. So we were dropped by float plane, and then we kayaked out, individual kayaks, obviously. River was running huge. This was running at 275 cubic meters a second, and the typical flow for that time of year was about 120. So it was well over twice its normal volume and strength. And yeah, I was taken very much to the limits, but I think being taken to and even beyond the limits was part of what prepared me for what happened there, which I'll never. Well, it changed me. Yeah, changed me.
You got knocked off your kayak several times, or it appeared that way. How cold was the water, and how cold was the air?
Oh, well, we were in dry suits, so dry suits are pretty miraculous. So there were times when the sun went in. We were lucky; mostly we were sunlit, and it makes just the mood, the spirit, kind of thrives on the gold, as it were. When you're in hard places like that, I find when the sun goes behind a cloud, you can feel your morale, your confidence plummet. So I really fed off the sun. I kind of made honey from it in my bones when it was there. But it was mostly there. So, yeah, I do get cold now. I'm old, Richard. I know you're a spring chicken, but I'm nearly 50. So
wait 25 years and then look around and go, what the hell happened there?
Well, the river both rejuvenated me and aged my bones, for sure.
You're listening to an interview with Robert Macfarlane, whose latest book is A River Alive? I'm Richard Wolinsky on the Bookwaves, Artwaves Hour. Barry Lopez, you mentioned him in the book. I interviewed him around 2000-ish, and he was very calm, very serene.
Yeah.
And that voice just could lull you into a trance. Right. The last time I interviewed him was shortly before he died, and he seemed like a very angry man. Was that just me? Was that just the day?
Well, I saw Barry shortly before he died. I saw him in Portland, where I speak to you from today, in 2019, and it was a deeply moving, he'd been a lodestar to me. It was a deeply moving encounter, and he was so kind to me. We did a public event that many people since have gone and watched on YouTube, I know, because I hear a lot about it. But he did come to task me with something, and this is where the intersection, it wasn't anger, but it was urgency. And he came to tell me there is work to be done. And I think he knew that he didn't have long to undertake that work himself. He was very insistent and urgent in a generous and beautiful way. But yeah, he also has, he had seen the world burn since when he had first written Arctic Dreams in the early 80s. That region has undergone more radical transformation than any other in the hands of the climate. So yeah, he was afraid, he was angry, and he was urgent.
The spring itself, were you going to write more about it? Because they're very short segments.
No, not really. So the spring, the one near my house, it opens the book, it ends the book, prologue and epilogue, and then it rises twice between Ecuador and India and Quebec. Became a way of thinking with water, writing about a landscape I know so well. I visit that spring 3 times a week when I'm at home. I suppose the only other thing to say is that it took me going around the world and meeting rivers and river people and river ideas to realize that many of those river people and river ideas were in my country too, where we have this stricken river system, but we also have this amazing, hopeful guardianship movement that's risen up in the face of harm and is seeking to heal the rivers and heal people with them.
I just read a Guardian interview that they did with you. You wrote, and you sort of repeated this here, but you said in that interview, this was originally imagined as a book about life, which you just mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. The stories we tell about what is alive and what is dead, and comparing that to what power feels about what is alive and what is dead. How can we define life in such a way that we can call a river alive?
It's the question, and it is a question. It is a quest into that question, the book. And I, as you know, I kind of veer back and forth from the confident answer of it. I mean, I think of someone like Rita or other people particularly from indigenous backgrounds that I've met, for whom they're referring to a river as relative, as kin, is just absolutely, it's so self-evident. Like, of course a river's alive, of course it lives. For us, those of us who've been brought up in rationalism, it's harder. I think I think 2 things about it. One is, if you find it hard to imagine a river being alive, imagine a dying river or a dead river. We know what that looks like. We know how it feels. It doesn't reach the sea. Its fish float belly up. It catches fire, like the Cuyahoga or the Don in Toronto. And if a river can die, it can live. And it's a life force that brings life. It enlivens in an aura around itself. We live in relation to flowing fresh water. It's a memory keeper, a storyteller. We feel with it. We think with it. Our life is continuous with its life. To me, now, when I say it like that, it feels very simple. I don't know. How does it sound to you?
Well, it's kind of weird that you mentioned in that 3rd section the Racket River very briefly in New York. And my family had a house for a while up at Tupper Lake, and the Racket River runs through Tupper. So I have been on a boat on the Racket River, and it almost feels like a person in a weird way. I mean, when you're on a river like that and you get to know the river,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you say it. I can hear the embarrassment in your voice. You're waiting, you're almost apologizing for it. But yeah, it feels like a person. And that doesn't mean it feels like a human. It's just that the category person shifts so that it includes rivers as well as humans and critters.
You mentioned in the book that if the Supreme Court of the United States can call a corporation a person, then why not parts of nature as well?
Well, no, I sometimes use this thought experiment just to recognize the fact that Euro-American law has naturalized to the point of imperceptibility the fact that a more than human entity can be a legal person, can bear rights, because that is the corporation, that is the company. And in my country, in England, corporations have the right to privacy, they have the right to a fair trial. Those rights are partly guaranteed under the European Convention on Human Rights, amazingly. But if you say to a kind of, well, let's say a Trumpian, a river should have rights, they would rise up in outrage at the notion. And yet these presences have been in our landscapes for 10, 12,000 years or more, bringing life, organizing human history around themselves. Almost every American city is founded on a river. And yet we have forgotten how vital to our flourishing and the life of the earth, the future life of the earth, rivers are. So they are rare, they are fragile, they do have rights. And it seems very self-evident to me that we should recognize and respect those. And that's a way of reimagining law. The law is a storied thing, and as such, it can be restoried. We've told it as a story about human supremacy, but we need to tell a bigger, broader, deeper, and faster flowing story.
Rob Macfarlane, I want to change the topic while we have a couple of minutes and talk about what you, as someone from England, how you're viewing out of the country, looking at America, and what it feels like as you tour America. I mean, is there any difference now than there was, say, a year ago? Or is it just that what's happening out of Washington feels different?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reminded that good Americans are some of the best people in the world, the very best people in the world. I'm reminded that there are many, many Americas. Barry Lopez, who we spoke of, wrote an essay on this called American Geographies, which is spectacular on the diversity of your country geographically, but also in terms of people. I mean, we're speaking as Trump sends in Marines and National Guard to LA to suppress a perceived violence, using a kind of mega force performatively to prove a strongman ability. And people feel frightened this time around, frightened to speak. I think internal censorship, which is the most effective form of censorship, that is self-censorship, it has been very successfully propagated by this administration in ways I've never experienced in any state before. But I'm also meeting with hope, with anger, with fear, with love, all of the things that will be necessary to drive change for the better in your country. I've no doubt you'll heal this.
Have you talked to other people at home, when you're at home, who say, well, I would have gone to the United States this summer, but now I won't?
Oh, so many. And Canada in particular, I came to North America from Canada. I was anxious about getting in. I published a New York Times op-ed that you mentioned about the Trump administration and attempts to circumvent the Clean Water Act and the executive orders and their consequences for rivers. That came out the day before I crossed the border into the country. And it wouldn't have surprised me at all if that had been problematic. In fact, I sailed in. But yeah, I think people are turning away, which is a shame, because the last thing we need to do right now is to isolate you, I think.
Is the vibe similar here now on some level with what you experienced in Chennai in terms of people being scared?
No, different order, different kind of structures of intimidation, let's say. Yeah, there was a wit and a humor to the resistance in Chennai that was very singular to Yuvan and to his group of young activists, and that I've seen that here as well. I mean, maybe we could just end by speaking of hope. And one of the most hopeful stories of any kind that I know of the last 2 unhopeful years is the story of the Klamath River, which flows out of Oregon into California. And it became the focus of the largest de-damming project in U.S. history, possibly world history. And those dams had stood, the oldest of them had stood for 100 years. And they'd completely reshaped the river basin. And 25 years or so ago, and a broad alliance led by the Yurok tribe began to imagine that river otherwise. What will the Klamath look like if it were de-dammed? And everyone laughed because it was never going to happen. And then slowly the political will, the imaginative will, the emotional will all gathered, and those dams were dismantled. And life has poured back into the Klamath. The salmon, the wetlands, the prairies beyond them, the wildflowers, the people, all of it. Give rivers a chance and their life will pour back, and ours will pour back with it.
You've been listening to an interview with Robert Macfarlane, whose book is a River Alive? I'm Richard Wolinsky on the Bookwaves Artwaves Hour. Coming up now, the weekly Bookwaves Artwaves Theater Review. The golden age of the Broadway musical faded in the 60s. The age of Sondheim and the pop opera died before the new century, and since then, the Great White Way is atrophied into a world of corporate jukeboxes, pointless renderings of hit movies, little shows that could, and hits that never close. And then there's 2003's Hairspray, now in a fine production at San Francisco Playhouse through September 12th. It's not as if the show vanished. It pops up frequently in community theaters these days, filling in the gaps between the Spelling Bee, Audrey II, Hedwig, and a host of Sondheims. Without a Broadway revival, Hairspray never inserted itself into the canon, and it should, particularly now. John Waters' most mainstream film from 1988 was a tribute to the outsiders, outcasts, and freaks he grew up with in Baltimore, those very people inhabiting his earlier films, most notably his muse, the drag superstar Divine. Cast as Edna Turnblad, mother of the full-figured Tracy Turnblad. The film was a love letter to the way song and dance could overcome racism, body shaming, and all the biases that had control of America in 1962. Hairspray the musical, with tuneful and memorable songs by Mark Shaman, stayed true to the politics and kept memories of Divine alive by always casting Edna in drag, first with Harvey Fierstein and later with John Travolta in the film. Hairspray was the sweetest of all John Waters' films, and that sweetness is reflected in the musical itself, and particularly in this production. It's seen here in the superb performance of Ella Ruth Francis, who embodies Tracy with as much joy, energy, and voice as any performer in the role on Broadway. She is Tracy Turnblad. Other standouts include Jordan Covington as Seaweed, whose body movement in every scene is a joy to behold. And there's Janine Anderson as a gospel voice, Motormouth Maybelle, and Allison Ewing as the amusingly villainous Velma Van Tussle. Jonathan Chisholm as Edna takes a back seat during most of the show, only stepping out in the final scenes. The casting of Edna may have once been a tribute to Divine, but today there's a political subtext that enhances the show's theme of inclusion. One caveat: the decibel level toward the end is a bit off the charts, so be forewarned, but mostly it's just a grand night in the theater, a musical to enjoy and savor. Hairspray, directed by Bill English, plays at San Francisco Playhouse through September 12th, and for more information, you can go to sfplayhouse.org. Until next week, I'm Richard Wolinsky on the Bookwaves Artwaves Hour.
You just sent me a raccoon opening a fridge and grabbing something.
Did you watch the whole thing, though?
Yeah, that's not the point.
Come on, man. It opened it like it had leftovers in there.
Why am I getting 5 of these a day?
Is it that obvious I'm trying not to think about the timeline we're living in?
A little.
Honestly, Rod, the news just feels weird, man.
Fair.
I just don't know what's real anymore.
That's why we end up on KPFA.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd do without KPFA.
Sanity, huh? A place to actually understand what's going on.
Not just the same panic loop.
Exactly.
All right, I got one more video.
Yeah, I know you do.
KPFA. Stay informed without losing your mind.
Let's be honest, there are plenty of subscriptions taking your money and giving you very little back. KPFA is not one of them. The station is here every day, free, bringing you independent news when it matters most. That only happens because listeners step up as monthly sustainers. A guardian of KPFA means your subscription keeps this station free for everyone, including people who cannot afford to give. Right now, one of the kindest things you can do is help somebody stay informed. Become a guardian at kpfa.org.
You can touch that dial if you miss being told what to think. This is 94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online everywhere at kpfa.org.